Elysia Nates is from South Australia and writes contemporary fiction. She is the single parent to a 9-year-old daughter, and she loves animals, reading, writing, obviously, and anything to do with Molly Ringwald. So listen to our chat today and find out how she started writing her book, her experiences with publishing, and if you are also in Australia, you'll find this particularly interesting when it comes to paperback books. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you can hear Elysia and I chat more about what happens after you've published your novel, because it turns out writing the book is just the beginning. Let's listen to what Elysia has to share with you today. Welcome to the Turning Readers into Writers podcast, where we teach beginner writers how to find the time and the confidence to write their first novel. I'm your host, Emma Desi, and I'm very excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me today, because if you've been longing to write your novel for forever, then this is the place to be. Think of this as your weekly dose of encouragement, of hand-holding and general cheerleading as you figure out how you're going to write your first novel. Trust me, as a mum of 3 young kids, I know how tricky it can be to tuck some time aside for yourself on a regular basis. And even when you do find that spare 5 minutes, you can feel so overwhelmed that no writing gets done. Trust me, I have been there, but this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because once a week I'll be delivering an episode that gives you steps to building a writing routine, encouragement to build your confidence, and cheerleading until you reach the end. Okay, let's start. Well, Elysia, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very thrilled to be here.
I wonder if we could just start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and what prompted you to start writing.
No worries. I'm a 39-year-old South Australian, and I started writing stories in primary school, just the normal school projects, but I enjoyed it a little bit too much. And then when I was 14, I started thinking seriously about the idea of writing a book, and I actually sat down at my dressing table and wrote 4 characters' names and the way I perceived them in my head, and wrote a little synopsis for a story. And then over the course of 25 years, I kept coming back and forth to it, and then it just became my book.
Wow, I didn't realise that. So you've been, you've been working on this for 25 years. Oh, it's a real passion project then.
It is, very much so. And it's not as if I was writing constantly for 25 years. There'd be sometimes there'd be a year where I didn't get an opportunity to write, but I'd write little things in my phone or write notes on a piece of paper, and I always came back to it.
Oh, I think that's, I talked to somebody recently who was similar, but you've beaten her record. She'd been working on hers for 10 years. So I think you've exceeded that. But I think that's quite normal, isn't it? A lot of people will sort of start writing perhaps as a teenager, and then life takes over and we go away and we do the other stuff and we come back to it and go away and come back. That's certainly sort of what happened to me. I remember being 16 and writing my first attempt at a young adult movie script. I remember the title. It was That's Crazy April, but I don't remember anything about what happened. I wish I did.
It's a good title.
And so, wow, so you've been writing that for a long time. And so tell us a little bit about it, because it's maybe it hasn't always been, it's got quite a fairly dark theme to it for somebody who started writing at a young age.
It did, but the theme evolved because I had ovarian cancer at the time. So I was going through some pretty atypical adolescent things. So that sort of shaped the story.
I see. Oh, wow. So you had that at such a young age.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
goodness.
It opened my eyes to things that, people that age normally don't have to think about, your own death and things like that. So it does seem quite dark, but the book's not meant to be dark. It's meant to be about the way we cope. The cancer could almost be a metaphor. It's whatever you cope with in your life, if it's a divorce, if it's an anxiety or anything, it's just about the way you cope with things. And the central character copes with her thing, which happens to be cancer, by pretending her life is a movie.
I can relate to that.
Me too.
So tell us a little bit more about it.
So the central character is Mackenzie, and she has terminal cancer and has been given a guideline of about 12 months to live. And the story basically just follows her and her sister Evie, and the two male characters are Oakley and Luke. And it's just about their circle and how, even though Mackenzie's the one with cancer, the book shows that her whole circle is affected, and it's not just Mackenzie that's coping with her impending death. It's her whole friends, and they're also not living as they should be because of what's going to happen. So, but it's meant to read uplifting, and I always had this idea in my head that I wanted people to read it as if they were watching a movie. And the feedback that I've had so far, people say they can visualise it as if they're watching a movie, which is just all I wanted. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, that's great to have that feedback and know that you've achieved what you wanted. Yes. So, I don't know if you can remember all the way back then, but I'm thinking about who might have been your influences when you first started writing, and then maybe how.
Oh, I can definitely remember.
Okay, cool.
I read a book called Loving April by Melvin Burgess, and I've never read anything of that author's again, but I read that novel and I was obsessed with it. I forced my sister to read it. I kept going on about it. I said, you have to read it. And she read it and she didn't like it. And I got into a fight with her. I said, you didn't read it properly. And I insisted that she read it again. And I ended up reading it maybe 30 times that year. I was obsessed with it. And just the fact that someone can just completely make something up that someone can get obsessed with, I thought, that's what I want to do. I thought it was amazing. So
And do you still feel that passionately about the stories that you read now? Who might be your inspiration now?
Sally Rooney, I'm a big fan of. Like Normal People, I started reading that after I put my daughter to bed. And then come 1 a.m., I still wanted to keep reading. So I finished that book in one night. I couldn't put it down. And then the next day was Saturday and I went shopping and I was thinking about Connell and Marianne. I couldn't get them out of my head as if I'd just finished speaking to them. So Saturday night, the night after, when I finished putting my daughter to bed, I read it again. And again, just the fact that someone can completely make something up that people get obsessed with, that's amazing, that you can give someone an avenue to completely get lost in and forget about their own life and think that you actually met Marianne and Connell. You know, that's what I want to do. I've always wanted to create something like that for someone, even if it's just one person.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, yes, I love that passion that you've got. I wonder if that intensity of kind of falling into another world and being consumed by another world, do you think that is something that you've always had, or do you think that was a kind of a response to what you went through with the cancer, the idea of perhaps not wanting to be in my own life, wanting to have this other life, and it was a sort of escape route, but it's still something that you turn to now?
Yeah, I think, back then I was very almost robotic, and it wasn't really, because it was quite heavy, I didn't really process it as if it was happening to me. I was just concerned that Mum was upset and that Dad was having to work a lot and that my sisters were sad. So I just focused on them. And I think that's sort of where I got the whole coping mechanism, as if you pretend it's happening to someone else or if you're watching it on a movie. So I did become very passionate about thinking about things from other people's perspectives. And yeah.
Well, that's a really good trait to have, I think, as a writer, isn't it? So when you're developing characters and trying to differentiate one character from the other, I think a lot of us, especially in the beginning, and I'm guilty of this as well, making our characters perhaps too like ourselves until we get more practiced at developing them. Wow, okay. So now tell us when your book was published.
So I published it on KDP last month, and then we had shipping issues getting it here in Australia, unless you paid like $40 or $60. So wow. I'm in the progress. Yeah, it's really hard to import books here. And I think the bulk of my people who will want to buy it are Australians. So I had to go to Ingram Spark, which is what I'm in the process of doing now, because they have a distributing firm in Melbourne.
So let's go back to KDP for a moment. So for those listeners who aren't yet at the publishing stage, KDP is the platform that you use to publish on Amazon Books. So have you opted only to do a paperback, or are you also doing ebook as well?
At this stage, I've only done paperback. I haven't familiarised myself with the formatting for ebooks, and that's I'm very old school. I've never actually read an ebook, but I have to acknowledge the fact that that's the world we live in. So I do need to go down that road, but I'm putting it off as long as I can.
Oh, it's so interesting to hear, because somebody that I follow online, Joanna Penn, she used to live in Australia. She's back in the UK now, but that was what prompted her to actually get a Kindle back in, 2009, 2010, because I didn't realise that books are so expensive and difficult to get hold of in Australia. And she was saying that just kind of changed everything for her. But not you. You like the touch and the feel of the paperback.
Yeah, I'm a bit stubborn. If I like the paperbacks, everyone else has to. So I'll get the paperback sorted first, and then I'll cave in eventually and do the ebook. But not yet. Not yet.
So because of the difficulties of getting the book from Amazon over to Australia, you've said that you're going with Ingram Spark. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about who Ingram Spark are and your experiences with them so far.
So Ingram Spark, I believe, are also an American company, but they have a warehouse here, whereas the Amazon Australia is completely separate to the rest of the world, which I didn't know.
No.
So Ingram Spark's formatting and processes are all very, very different to KDP, and it's been very frustrating because I'm not very tech savvy, whereas KDP was pretty straightforward. But I am struggling a bit with Ingram Spark. So I've had to email the poor girls at the help desk many, many times and really bothered them. And I promised them all a copy of my book. And they're all very lovely, very accommodating. They humour me when I insult myself. And so I don't have anything bad to say about them. I do find it a little bit more difficult. But that's probably me.
Well, I'm sure no. I mean, I've only published ebook, and I found that to be the simplest and the least daunting, which is why I've resisted doing paperback so far, because one of the things is trying to work out the spine, the cover for the spine, and it involves maths, and I'm not very good at numbers.
I had to the help of a friend there.
Yeah, I might have to do the same. So I haven't gone to the Spark yet. Do they format their books very differently to Amazon as well? So say the book cover that you've got and the spine cover that you've got, do you have to have new ones made up for Ingram Spark?
So the interior I was able to just transfer over. That was no drama. But the cover, yes, the template's completely different. On KDP, I just opened up their template generator and uploaded my image onto it. There was no dramas. But with Ingram, it doesn't. You open the PDF and it doesn't actually let you edit it unless you've got certain programs, and I couldn't get the right program to do it. That's when I ended up messaging my friend crying, saying it's never going to be republished and Australians can never read my book because I can't figure it out. But she finally figured it out for me. But I think the spine still doesn't quite match up. I think a little bit of the front cover is going to curve over onto the spine, but I've resigned myself to the fact that that's probably, it might look good. I'm just ready for it to be done now.
Yes.
I thought last month I'd done it all with the KDP, and now I feel like I have to start again. So it was quite disheartening.
It's a great point though that you raise. I think it's there are pros and cons to both traditional and independent publishing, and we kind of know the pros and cons of traditional publishing, but with indie, yes, it's really easy to do. You can write your book, get it edited and put it up straight away. Another benefit is you can edit your book at a future date. You don't have to go back to the publisher or anything. But another part of that job of being an indie writer is being the publisher as well. And so with that comes its own set of skills. And I've chickened out, as I say, and haven't yet ventured down that particular skill set. So it's a good point you raise for people. Now, I want to move on a little bit towards the sort of the day-to-day business of being a writer. So I can see in the background your daughter is there, and
Yes.
I know that you're a single parent, so you have your hands full.
Yes.
So how do you manage to fit your writing time in around any day job, the parenting responsibilities, and just having a social life as well?
Well, in an ideal world, I would very much love to be a full-time writer, but we all have bills to pay. And as you've said, I am a single parent. So I do work. I work in aged care. I work 60 hours a fortnight, so it's part-time, but it is still quite taxing. Mm-hmm. And then I have my child and, the normal housework to do and grocery shopping, and we have a dog and guinea pigs and a rabbit. So generally it's 10 o'clock at night. And I find I'm not the most disciplined person when it comes to my writing. I'm not someone that says, I've got this half an hour block I have to write. There'll be some days where I genuinely do not feel like writing and I don't force myself. But usually I would rather get everything done, and then instead of sitting down to watch a movie or instead of scrolling Facebook, I would much rather write. So if you want to do it, you find time to do it, even if it's at 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And do you find that well, you must do, because you've written your book, because for me, I'm in bed by 10 o'clock at night. So it's like, I'm intrigued that you're just starting. So can you go, say, would you do 10 to 11 and that's enough? Or are you able to keep going?
Well, as you can see under my eyes, I don't get a lot of sleep. So I generally write from about 10 to 11:30, and then I get up about 6:30. So I don't really get a lot of sleep, but I just function that way. I'm quite a nervous, anxious person, so I don't need a lot of sleep.
And so for each of your writing sessions, it sounds like you're perhaps quite an instinctive writer, but I wonder, do you know that you want to write this particular scene or chapter, or that you want to edit a particular chapter? Do you plan ahead what you're going to do, or do you just sit down with your laptop or your pen and paper and see what happens?
Well, it takes me a long time to get new material out, because generally every single time I start writing, I read from the beginning again. So every time I start writing a new chapter, I read from the beginning and I edit that as I go, and then I write a new chapter. So it takes me a long time to get there. But generally I know what I want to write that night, because I've written little notes in my phone and that during the week, or I've heard a song on the radio that made me think of something I want to put in. So it all builds up in here, and then I just use that time at night to get it out on the laptop.
Okay, so that's quite a nice mixture, not exactly of plotting as such, but certainly planning ahead and giving yourself some pointers about what you want to write next. But I'm intrigued, though, about, say you get to, I don't know, halfway through the manuscript, 3/4 of the way through the manuscript, do you still write from the very beginning? Do you still read from the very beginning and go all the way through?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm impressed. I'm such a slow reader. I don't think I'd be up all night, I think, if I was to do that.
I usually am, yeah. I'm only 10,000 words into my second book, so at the moment it's not really that taxing. But with my first book, towards the end, I would only read like the previous 5 chapters. Right. But usually the whole way through, I go right back to the beginning, up until about 3/4 of the way through, that I just kept going to the last 5 chapters.
And so that gives you enough of a feel for where you've been and get it back into the swing of things and the tone as well. Yeah. It's a good idea.
And I think it's inevitable. The more you write, the story develops a bit, and it might make the characters change a little bit. So I like to go back and make sure that there's a continuity with the storyline and events that are going to happen. There was seedlings of that within the character there, and just so it's all a bit more natural.
Mm-hmm. So then if you're kind of editing as you go along, you must have a very sort of clean draft at the end then. And do you still go back and then do another full edit?
Yes. And then even when I published it, I still found mistakes.
It feels inevitable. I've been going back through both of my published books, and have been finding more errors, and it's how you think, how did these escape? They've escaped me, they've escaped my editor, they've escaped the beta readers, and still there's 1 or 2 that slip past.
Mm-hmm. It's infuriating. But But then, as someone pointed out, there's literally mistakes in Stephen King novels. So,
got to take comfort from that. And being an indie, I think that's the advantage, is you can immediately go back and fix it, and so the next person gets the corrected one. Now we are, for anybody listening in the future, we are we're in, where are we? We're at the end of October 2020 as we're recording this, which means the majority of the world is still in a degree of lockdown. We've just been through 9 months of quite heavy lockdown. I think in Australia you've had quite a turbulent year, I think, because you've had a lot of fires this year as well. So there's been lots going on. How have you found being kind of housebound for a great period of time? Have you found it beneficial? Has it helped your writing, or has it hindered you? How have you found it?
Well, I'm in South Australia, so we had maybe just a couple of months of lockdown. But for the last few weeks, not so much, because we don't have active cases anymore. It's very different in Melbourne. Right. But for me, I didn't really struggle during the lockdown period because I'm quite introverted. I don't really like going out very much. So unless it's out to tea with my family, that sort of stuff I did miss. But, we drove to each other's houses and just kept our distance. Mum would be at the front door and we'd be on the lawn and that. So we still maintained the emotional connection. Mm-hmm. And then, it didn't really affect the rest of my life because I don't go out very much anyway.
But did you have to homeschool?
No. So my daughter Ruby, her school broke up a week early. So there was just 1 week that she was at home and I was working from home at that time. And she's a breeze to look after. We're really good mates. So she just let me work, and it was just an extra week of holidays. I didn't actually have to educate her, which is a good thing because, I don't understand maths and all that stuff. So it worked out well.
Oh, that did work out well. Oh, so you've had quite a good lockdown then. I find it, like you, I'm happy to be at home, and having the excuse not to leave the house for 3 days, I was very happy with that. But I certainly found having the kids home and doing the homeschooling just bumped the routine around. And so it took a little while to recalibrate and find a new normal, as they describe it. Yeah. So tell us, what are you working on next? You mentioned that you have a new project.
I do. So I'm just passing my daughter something. In my writing career in my head, I've always had 5 books that I want to write. And I let my daughter pick the second book because I have them all written down. I said, which book should I write next? So she picked the one that I'm working on, which is called Benched. And that's basically because I'm always about human connections. I like the way people interact with each other and embodied experiences and coping mechanisms and all that. That's sort of always at the core of what I write about. So Benched is about a lost female teenager and a lost male teenager, and the one thing that connects them, which is the basketball bench.
Okay, so it's got the sports theme. Yeah. So
sports theme, but it's still about relationships and human connection and all that, and coping mechanisms. Again, the bench is just sort of a little bit of a metaphor.
Oh no, I like that. And is the new book, is that a YA book as well?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So who are your YA, who do you admire, whose work do you admire in that genre?
I really like Anna Todd.
Is she
the After series?
Which series, sorry?
The After series.
After series. And is she an Australian writer at all, or?
No, she's an American writer.
Okay. But that's the kind of, and I'm guessing it's a series. So is that what you'd quite like to do as well? Have a series about the same characters, or do you prefer to do a standalone book?
Definitely standalone. I have no desire at all to write series.
Yeah, no, me neither. It's funny how it grabs some people as being as wanting, really to get to know those characters and those worlds and tell more stories about them. I find I get a little bit, I'm ready to move on to new people by the end of by the end of the book.
And particularly like with my first book, because I'd been working on it basically my entire adult life, I found it very hard to let them go. But I needed to. I felt like I'd spent a long time with them, and they were ready to go into the world, and I was ready to create new characters, and there was nothing else that I could do with them. So I would never want to write a sequel or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like creating new stories and new characters.
And so where did the inspiration for this one come from?
Well, my daughter plays basketball, and it was literally, I saw her sitting on the bench one day, and I always thought that if you're sitting on the bench, you know, you might feel awkward or not part of the team, but she was so into it. She was sitting on the bench cheering for her teammates and everything, and it just got me thinking that she still belongs on the bench, and that's what the synopsis is. You still belong, and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, nice. That's lovely. And so I'm just thinking, where can listeners find out more about you and about your books online?
So my online presence at the moment is pretty non-existent, which is why I'm trying to go down the avenues, meeting lovely people like yourself and sort of trying to ascertain what I'm actually meant to do. Because, you know, it's one thing to write the book and finish the book and then publish the book. And then beyond that, I don't really know. So I've started following different people on Instagram and joined some writers groups. This is like the first time that I've ever publicly spoken about my book. So, because I'm sort of just happy, you know, if a couple of my friends read it, I always just thought as long as I don't lose money and I want a couple of people to hopefully enjoy it, then I feel like I've achieved my dreams. So I really do feel like I've achieved my dreams. So anything else, like talking to people like you, this is just a bonus.
It's funny, isn't
so my online presence is a work in progress.
But we can find your book on Amazon at the moment, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you're in Australia, then you have to wait for Ingram Spark.
Well, I'll put a link to the to Amazon UK anyway, and people can go from there and find it on their local Amazon too. Well, Elysia, it's been lovely chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time. Good luck with the new book.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely to meet you. I love your accent, by the way.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.